everybody. It's a Sunday edition of Daily Distinction. Glad you are here. Somebody asked me why on the weekends am I either here inside the house or yesterday was outside the house. And, one of the things that I think is important is, especially for those of us that work at home, my office has been in the house for a long period of time, but more and more people are getting into that now than ever before. And I think it's kind of important sometimes that we get our tails out of the office. It's easy when you work at home. And I know especially for those of you that are relatively new to working remotely, man, one of the things that's really easy to do is to spend all your time in the office. And I'm guilty of that. Tammy reminds me of that, and I'm working on that. So that's why on the weekends, not even sitting in the office to do this. I'll be there tonight for the Ken and Glenn show with a guy named Scott. But I think it's important that we get out of the office every once in a while. So how are you spending this day before Memorial Day that doesn't seem like a Sunday or seem like a holiday? Pretty crazy, isn't it? Hey, as everybody's signing on too, I want to remind you, thank you as always for sharing. If you're watching on the replay, thank you for that. I say this every day. I'm blown away by how many folks are watching on the replay, and more people watch on the replay than watch live. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for sharing the broadcast. I don't know what the screencast, I guess. What is the right we do? I don't know. Ken Walls can fill me in on that. So anyway, thank you for sharing it. I really appreciate it. And tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific, it's the Ken and Glenn show with a guy named Scott. We have a very special guest with us tonight. It is the king of sales, Jeffrey Gitomer, is going to be joining us tonight on the show. I promise anything Jeffrey's involved in, it's going to be a wild time. So make certain that you catch up with us tonight. Would love to have you there. So Pam, how you doing? Happy Indy Day. Yeah, on the day that there's no Indy 500. Just got a text from Tom Haley, my pal back in Indianapolis, who is watching, I guess they're showing right now the replay of last year's race online. So at least they've got something going on that's Indy, and they're showing the new Indy cars for this coming year, and they have windshields, which they have never had before. So how about that? So it's Indy Day. Danny, had to move my desk out of my bedroom for that. Yeah, exactly. It gets so easy to just get so consumed by this. When I used to do a program with my wife, and it was called "When Home Is the Office Too," and we talked about how you had to set up boundaries. We're not really good in we'd go to work and we'd expect a job description, but we're not really good at that when we're solo, working out of our house or working with our partner. And so job descriptions are kind of important. Office hours are kind of important because you're exactly right, Danny. You've got to get that separation. Charles from the Las Vegas version of Silicon Valley is about, no, see, it is a perfect weather day here, but I noticed that I guess what you've got is coming our direction because we're supposed to have massive heat here in Vegas by the middle of the week. So there you have it. But it just could not be nicer in Las Vegas right now. So great to see you. How's it going in Chicago? Bruce, good to see you. Currently 77 and getting things done. Hey, thank you for your post. I saw about your watch, your Apple Watch, how it popped up with the thing about the podcast. So thank you very much for that, Bruce. I really, really appreciate it. So I want to talk for just a second about a couple of things that's going on. And one is, I got to show you this. My pal Larry Winget just sent me this. Can you see that? Or is it everyone is wearing masks now, posers? From Friday the 13th and Halloween. I like that. That's cool. That is funny. Everyone's wearing masks now. But something that certainly isn't funny. I don't know if you've heard about it or if you get it. We get the Sunday New York Times. And the front page of today's New York Times is simply, that's 1,000 names, right? Look, that's just a list of names. And when you look at all of those names, those are people who have died from the coronavirus. And as it says, it's 1%. 1% of the toll. And one of the things that I think is so powerful and impactful about what they have here is it says, when we look at these, these 1,000 names, everything there is a name, right? And it's the name of a person who has died, and it represents 1% of the people who passed away. And it continues to say here that none of them were mere numbers. So as we have this weekend to celebrate the sacrifice that many have made, it's important to remember that there's a lot of families grieving right now as well. It's an important distinction, pardon the use of the word, but it's an important distinction, the difference between Veterans Day and Memorial Day. Veterans Day, which we celebrate every year, celebrates everyone who has served in the armed forces, right? Everybody that's served in the armed forces is celebrated on Veterans Day. The purpose of Memorial Day is to honor those who gave the ultimate sacrifice. It's to honor those who died during their time serving their country. So Memorial Day is always, to me, a more solemn occasion. We'll talk more about this tomorrow, but I was just thinking of that because when you go to the Indy 500, which is held on the Sunday before Memorial Day traditionally, one of the things they do is there's this long silence, and you've got 400,000 people around this track, and it's just silent as church, and they play taps. And man, if you don't get goosebumps on your arm when you hear them playing taps to honor the war dead, it's amazing. So it's a weekend to think about gratitude, I think. And that's the attitude I wanted to talk about. And as you know, on the weekends we do a little bit shorter version. But I wanted to talk about the importance of gratitude. You've heard me talk about it before. It's not just the attitude of gratitude, but it is the actual action where things happen. I mean, what you do is so much more important than what we say. The corollary to that is when I say, you hear so much when people say knowledge is power, and that's exactly wrong. Knowledge is not power. If knowledge was power, then university campuses would be the hub of everything. But they're not. And the reason that they're not is the application of knowledge that is power. The knowledge that you keep to yourself, the knowledge that you don't use, the knowledge that doesn't benefit you, it doesn't contribute to your success. So it's what you apply. One of the things I've been doing all weekend is taking part in a course. I want to continue to learn. I want to continue to study. If you haven't seen it yet, I sent out a survey about virtual meetings. There's a link. And if you can take that survey, I'd really appreciate it because I'm wanting to learn. I have this desire to learn. I think the more we learn, the more we appreciate as well, because the more that we become grateful for what's around us. So it's that attitude of appreciation, that attitude is so significant. Charles, great comment. The difference is great between Memorial Day and Veterans Day, but both are extremely important. As some of you know, my favorite client, biggest client for the last couple of years has been Volkswagen Australia, the Volkswagen Group Australia, which is Volkswagen, Audi, Porsche, Bentley, Lamborghini, Bugatti. Over there's another Skoda is another line that they have in Australia that they don't have here in the States. But the way that they celebrate Veterans Day, it has a different name over there, but the way it's celebrated in Australia, in part, is that the children can wear the medals that their parents earned in service. And I think that would be great on both Memorial Day and on Veterans Day, because I don't think that parents and their kids have had enough of a conversation about the contributions that their parents have made. My dad never talked with me very much about Korea. It was 2 years before he died, before we really had our first big conversation about what he'd done over there and because he just didn't want to talk about it. And it wasn't until my dad was a musician, a weekend musician, and all of his Army buddy friends had a reunion, and they came to the show where Dad was playing, and I got to meet a bunch of his old Army buddies, and they started telling me the stories. So Dad finally fessed up. it would be great, I think, if we could do that and make that a tradition here in the United States, because we need to be proud of the contributions, not only that individuals have made, but the individuals from our families have made, because that's part of what keeps a nation great. Whether you're watching in Australia or the United States or wherever in the world, United Kingdom, wherever in the world you happen to be watching today. So it's that appreciation for the contribution of others that is so significant. I ran across a quote as I was preparing the show today, and man, this thing has grabbed me so much, and I wanted to share it with you. It's from Mary Shelley. Now, if that name rings a bell, yes, this is the woman that wrote the book Frankenstein. And Percy Shelley, the writer, was her husband. And she wrote Frankenstein like 10 years before she wrote this quote. Let's read the quote. "There is but one solution to the intricate riddle of life." Isn't that a great phrase? The intricate riddle of life. "To improve ourselves and contribute to the happiness of others." So the solution, she says, to the intricate riddle of life is to work on ourselves, right? To improve ourselves. And it's our responsibility as well to contribute. Now, we can't control, but we can contribute to the happiness of others. But let me put this in a little bit of perspective here. When she wrote that, she had lost 3 of her children. 3 of her kids had died. 2 of them died in a pandemic. She had lost her husband because he had drowned. So with the death of her husband and with 3 of her children dead, she writes, "The intricate riddle of life is solved by improving ourselves and contributing to the happiness of others." If that doesn't wipe you out, I don't know what will. That is so incredibly powerful. It is the foundation of appreciation of life and appreciation of what's going on. Anzac Day, yeah, in Australia, New Zealand. It is, Randall, that's a great way to describe it. It's kind of a combination of Memorial Day and Veterans Day, but the way that they involve the families to honor the people in their family is just such a great tradition. So how do we improve ourselves, and how do we contribute to the happiness of others? Well, my friend Vince Antonucci is the minister of Verve Church here in Las Vegas, and I'm not going to give you a sermon. That's not the purpose of what I do. But Vince's message this morning had a couple of points that really struck me as being pretty incredible. And before I tell you what he said, and again, this is not to bring you a sermon, but it is to bring you some ideas. But my pal Dwayne Allen. And Dwayne watches the show occasionally. Dwayne, I don't know if you're watching now or on the replay, but Dwayne Allen posted a joke this morning that I just cracked up. I laughed out loud reading this thing. So an atheist is walking in the woods, and he's walking along in the woods, and all of a sudden behind him out jumps a grizzly bear, and the grizzly bear starts chasing the atheist. And the atheist runs, and there's nowhere to go. So he climbs up a tree, but of course bears can climb trees, but there's nowhere else for him to go to get off the path. And he climbs up the tree, and he's hanging on the bush as the bear is approaching the tree. And the atheist looks up to heaven and says, "Dear God, if you were there, you know that I don't believe in you. And it would be very hypocritical of me to use this moment to pray to you for safety when I've spent my life claiming that you don't exist. But dear God, if you do exist, I'm not going to ask for myself because that would be hypocritical. But if you do exist, could you make the bear a Christian?" And all of a sudden, the bear stops trying to climb the tree. The bear falls to his knees, puts his paws together, looks up, and says, "Dear Lord, thank you for the blessing of this meal in which I'm about to partake." I love that joke. Dwayne, that is so good. That is so good. So really, that's so cool. All right. So here's what really struck me this morning in in today's message. And that is, as we look at the division that's going on in the world, as we look at the division of what's happening, and oh gosh, I didn't bring it, but the front page of our Sunday edition of the Las Vegas paper is talking about this great divide going on in America right now. And I think Vince hit this morning at a couple of the reasons why it's asking, and it's how we need to change our attitude, because our attitude is so primary in how we perceive things, right? I mean, we've talked about the echo chamber before. We've talked about, the people look for confirmation, not information. That what we tend to do is to look to try to get things to reflect back to us what we already believe. And Vince suggested just two minor tweaks that could really benefit us in a major way. It's first of all to begin by expecting the best in the actions of others. I see so many people that expect the worst from folks. That the people who aren't wearing a mask are crude and awful, and the people who are wearing a mask are afraid and timid, and we project the worst possible evaluation on the action of others. Don't know if you've seen it, but the governor of North Dakota had a really, really interesting and fascinating talk that he gave at a press conference here recently. And he was talking about how we never know. We just never know what's behind why people do what they do. And what he was saying is we need to be nice. We need to be North Dakota nice. If somebody's wearing a mask, you don't know that they don't have a 5-year-old son on chemo or an 85-year-old mom in bad health. Don't expect the worst. Don't project the worst to them. Expect the best in the actions of others. What would happen in today's world if we assumed that people were doing their best, or there was a good reason why they did what they did, as opposed to assuming the worst? But the other thing is we have to be willing to forgive the worst in the actions of others. Now, Vince was really clear this morning in pointing out, we're not saying, oh, you robbed that store? Well, we forgive you. There's still consequences to bad behavior. There's still consequences to negative action. But you don't forgive somebody else for them. You do it for you. There's the oft-told story. I've said it in speeches. Vince said it this morning that, anger is like you drink rat poison and then wait on the rat to die. It's the only disease that kills the carrier and not the person that's infected you. We've got to be willing to forgive the worst actions in others. I've had situations in my life, two in particular, where people did me extraordinarily wrong. I had to forgive them for me. They probably don't even know about it. I mean, other than I told them in one case, but man, it's incredible that we have to be willing to forgive the actions of others. Danny, yeah, it was an amazing message. Yeah, you make a great. You say it's something that you have to work on. I think all of us do. I think we go through these peaks and valleys. I think it's it's easier to forgive someone else when our life is going pretty good, right? It's easy to be magnanimous when we're on top of the mountain. It's a whole lot harder when you find yourself in a rut and life is not the way you want it to be. It's a whole lot harder at that moment to be willing to offer forgiveness to someone else. It's more like, I can't wait for karma to get them. I'm not going to let go until they, and at the end of the day, it hurts us. Not being political here or trying to mention that, but one of the best examples I ever heard, I always thought it was ironic because, he's not known for eloquence as a speaker, but one of the greatest points about this was from former President George W. Bush. And you remember when the policemen were killed in that gunfire in Dallas, and several Dallas policemen were killed, and so they're having the memorial service for all these policemen that had unfortunately been shot and murdered. And the former president was asked to say a few words. And one of the things that he said is he talked about how we judge others based upon their worst mistakes, but we want people to judge us based on our best intentions. And that line has always resonated with me so much. And it's something that I want, hey, I want people to judge. I really meant to do well. I really meant that this would work out. I really meant that it would be okay. That's what I want everybody to judge me on, right? I meant well. I meant good. But I frequently find myself judging others on where they messed up. And I have to offer others the same level of forgiveness or the same level of understanding as what I would want for myself. Yeah. So Danny says, yes, people we love are easy to love, right? It's the ones that we don't that, because Jason always has such a great perspective. Jason, you have such great insight. In time, unforgiveness turns into bitterness and then indifference, enabling us to love anyone or receive love, isolating us. Yeah. When we are bitter, then become indifferent. And, Jason, I can't remember if we talked about this before or not. It might have been, I apologize. But that the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference, right? If somebody hates us, there's still passion involved, but when they just don't care, right? When there's indifference, man, that's the total opposite of love. And that indifference, when manifested over and over and over, creates somebody that's isolated from love. That's a brilliant point, Jason. Thank you. Charles, what were people like where you get? Yeah, exactly. I love that story. Charles is bringing up a story. If you weren't here when we talked about it, it's the first person I heard tell it was Earl Nightingale, many, many years ago. But guy sitting on a bench, and the couple comes by, and they roll down their window and say, "Hey, old timer, we're looking at moving here. What are people like here?" And the old guy says, "Well, what are people like where you came from?" He said, "Well, they're bitter and they're mean and they're just just hard to get along with." And the old guy says, "Well, that's probably what you'll find people like around here too." A couple minutes later, another car comes up. People roll down their window and say, "Hey, old timer, we're just kind of curious. We're thinking about moving here. What are people like here?" He says, "What are people like where you came from?" He said, they're positive and happy and everybody gets along, great neighbors." And he said, "Then that's probably what you're going to find here too." I love that story because you're going to find much of what you expect. Hey, Jeff, great to see you. Sorry, I missed your call last night. A winner is a dreamer that never gives up. That is so true. There's a great Jim Rohn story about how some of the things that he's done, and a competitor said, "You can't beat someone that won't quit." It's so true. If you never give up, it's hard to beat somebody that just won't quit. So and I'll be here again tomorrow on Memorial Day if you want to spend a few minutes talking about that. But as we finish here today, one of the things I want to remind us of is let's try to expect the best in the actions of others, even those with whom we disagree, and be willing to forgive them, not for their sake, but for our own. We've got enough things to worry about without clinging to bitterness, right? And remember the words of Mary Shelley, even as she had gone through such incredible tragedy in her life, is that the one solution to the intricate riddle of life is to improve ourselves. And what are you doing to improve yourself? That's part of what we talk about every day here, and to contribute to the happiness of others. So how are you contributing to the happiness of someone else this holiday weekend? As always, this is my favorite half hour of the day. Gosh, I meant to be short and we're really not. But I really appreciate you so much. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sharing. Remind you one more time that tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific, it's the Ken and Glenn Show. A guy named Scott and our special guest, Jeffrey Gitomer, joining us tonight. It's going to be a great show. I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow right here on Daily Distinction. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being here. And I look forward to talking to you again tomorrow.